Bitcoin crossing over $60,000 last week. That was for the first time since April, but we now have the first Bitcoin futures ETF expected to begin trading in the United States as soon as tomorrow. Joining us right now to discuss more is Michael L. He is Grayscale's CEO. Good morning. Good morning to you, Michael. This does seem like potentially an inflection point. Lots of questions about what it means for the SEC to allow it to go forward, whether they've really opined on it one way or the other, and what you think this portends. Let me just ask you straight up. In the short term, there's the Cramer view that maybe the run has already happened in anticipation of this. Then there's the sort of Novogratz view, which is this is just the beginning. I know it's your business, but where do you stand, at least in the short term?
Well, good morning. I am thrilled to be here. I think I'll give you the sun and shine or Grayscale view. This stands to be a very, very important week for Bitcoin and the entire digital asset ecosystem. Investors have been waiting for an ETF to debut in the U.S. market, and that is what has certainly propelled us back to near all-time highs.
What do you make of the fact that this is effectively a bet on the future price of Bitcoin as opposed to the price of Bitcoin? There is a distinction in this way, and what you think it means for the possibility that the SEC or the government will continue to think about, or will, in fact, regulate the underlying currency, if we want to call it that, or commodity, if we want to call it that, in the future?
Sure. Well, our point of view on this, I've been on the show talking with you about this before. Certainly, if the SEC has cleared the way for a Bitcoin futures ETF, we certainly believe that because the futures and the spot prices are, of course, interrelated, and pricing has always been one of their biggest hangups, that it does now clear the way for the SEC to approve a physically backed Bitcoin ETF and give further validation to the industry. And so I know from my team's point of view, working on this for years, we stand at the ready to file for GBTC to become an ETF and bring yet another option for investors to be able to access Bitcoin in their portfolios.
Do you think there's any chance that they stop it between now and tomorrow?
Well, there's really a 75-day review process that the SEC has to go through, and that now comes to a head today. So, of course, anything can happen, but certainly we're looking out for that signal and seeing the first of those futures products trading on the market as soon as tomorrow.
But what do you make of the fact that this is a futures product as opposed to a product that actually buys the underlying asset, and whether you think the SEC is going to come in and ultimately regulate that? What are you hearing? I know you have all sorts of lobbyists and other people who are working behind the scenes talking to various regulatory agencies about this.
Well, I think that there is a lot of excitement about regulators finally allowing a Bitcoin anything onto a national securities exchange. That being said, when you look at the structure of a Bitcoin futures product, there is going to be an impact to investors. You have to look at things like roll costs, moving from one contract month to the next. And when there's a commodity like Bitcoin, which can be stored quite easily the way that something like gold can, it typically makes more sense for investors to access it through a physically backed product than maybe something like oil, which is perhaps harder to store. Thus, a futures-based product may make more sense for it. So it's too early to say, but certainly I think investors should have the optionality to access Bitcoin through both futures as well as spot.
Michael, what's the chance that this pulls money away from your own fund? Which is to say, as institutional investors start to think about investing in this space, historically, they didn't have a lot of places to go. One of the places they went was your fund. Now they'll have something else.
Well, I think investors have typically gone into products like GBTC. Today, this is the world's largest Bitcoin fund. It holds over about 3.5% of the outstanding Bitcoin supply. And so I think the success of this product over the last 8 years really is evidence that a physically backed product is the way that investors want to access this. And ultimately, having both those options in the market, I think, is a good thing for the ecosystem overall.
I've always complained that the fees on your product are too high. Does this put any pressure on those fees?
I think, as we've said publicly, Andrew, when we come into the market with an ETF, we stand ready to reduce our fees. Certainly, there's going to be competitive fee pressure as more products come into the market, but it's too early to see what that landscape is going to look like.